Hello and welcome to this Morpheus presentation. During this session, what I intend to do is show you some of the features of the Morpheus product. Rather than give you a feature function walkthrough, what I'd like to do is actually deploy an application stack and deploy an application on top of it. And this will show you the power of Morpheus, how you can convert and connect clouds, and how you can tie into applications and make them available to your users through self-service provisioning. First of all, we're going to log on. So we're going to log into the system, and I'm logged in as a top-level admin in a top-level account. Now Morpheus is out of the box fully multi-tenanted aware, so you can create subtenants, which could be individual customers, but could be a department or a project team within your enterprise account. And this allows you to give them their own infrastructure and also run reports against them and make sure they have only access to the information they should have access to. First of all, we're going to start by looking at our dashboard. So I'm logged in and I can see some things are going on. And we've got four main areas here that Morpheus covers. So we have provisioning. So we can see instances that have been deployed. Now an instance in Morpheus terms could be a VM, could be an operating system, or it could be an application stack. It can also be a container. Morpheus has full support for Docker hosts and Docker containers. And during our presentation, we'll see those in action. We also have monitoring. Morpheus has full monitoring built in, which allows you, again, to monitor individual instances or indeed full application stacks. And not just looking to see if the instance is there, but also is it available, is it responding in a timely fashion, and if it is part of an application, is the application available, are all the components that you need for an application available for you to see. We also have logging. In the world of DevOps, it's becoming more and more useful to have access to log files, and usually you would need to log into your VMs and into your clouds to get hold of the logs, but Morpheus brings those back into a central location for log diving and analysis of what's going on. And again, you'll see during the presentation that logs can be viewed individually, can be viewed as part of an application stack, or can be viewed holistically across the whole system. And finally, backups. Again, Morpheus has backups built in, and this is really useful, again, because it allows a deployment to decide whether they want to back up at the time or maybe use a more mission-critical backup application. But what this allows you to do is have a standardized backup across all clouds that you're using. So we use the same methodology of application snapshot and a copy of that snapshot down to a Morpheus repository for all clouds that we can connect to. So you get a standardized way of doing it. Finally, just down here, one feature I like particularly about Morpheus is we also keep track of who's doing what. So we have a recent activity panel. What this allows you to do is, in conjunction with our full role-based access user control, is keep a track who's doing what, so that if you have a problem or you're trying to work out what's going on in the system, you can see who that is. And our role-based access user control is linked in at a tenant level. So each tenant you create has their own set of users. They have their own roles, and that can be integrated into identification systems, things like LDAP, AD, Okta, etc. So you don't have to go recreating your user base when you deploy Morpheus. You can hook us into your existing infrastructure and get going very quickly. Now, as I said, I'm not going to give you a feature function walkthrough, but I do want to show you just very quickly our infrastructure section, because this will show you our range of support for clouds. So we're going to go into a concept called groups. Groups are a construct that allow us to tie users and clouds together. So you have a group at a tenant level, you can assign users to groups, and then you configure groups with clouds. And that could be as simple as a one-to-one. So you could have a group of users connected to a cloud, to a group, and then that cloud, that group has one cloud configured within it. So for example, down here we have one called San Mateo VMware, and there's one cloud in there. And I know that that's a VMware infrastructure, and that if I'm a member of that group and that group alone, I can deploy into that VMware infrastructure, into a controlled section of that VMware infrastructure. However, of course, what we're wanting to do is perhaps deploy across multiple clouds and have applications that can scale out. So it is possible to have groups with multiple clouds in there. And the one you're going to see me use during this presentation is the group demo. And as you can see, that has 8 clouds in it. And if I click on that, and we'll have a look to see what that looks like, when we go into clouds, you'll see that we have a range of clouds available to us, from public clouds like Amazon and Azure to private clouds like OpenStack and VMware. So when I go to deploy my instances, I can pick which cloud I want to go into because I'm a member of this group. Just to show you, this is the current range of supported clouds from a Morpheus point of view. On the public side, we have Azure and Amazon, of course, plus DigitalOcean, Google Software, and we do have vCloud Air in there as well. On the private side, we have everything from Hyper-V and VMware, obviously the most popular ones, to things like OpenStack and Nutanix and even ESXi directly. Just to show you very quickly, if I wanted, for example, to connect to a VMware infrastructure now, it would simply be a case of saying add. I would give it a name that means something to me within the system, something meaningful from a user point of view, perhaps VMware Test or VMware Dev London, and we then can make it available to an account within Morpheus, or we can make it available to all accounts within Morpheus. We're very flexible around the control of what you can do and see. And then we simply put in our vCenter credentials, administrator level, and then we can zone this connection by the virtual data center, by cluster, so we can be very controlling around where the deployments are going to go. And then we have the ability to also, if we want to at this level, pick resource pool. So we can sort of split our VMware infrastructure up by resource pool. But we can also do this at other levels. We can actually assign resource pools to different tenants, and that would be a subject of a more detailed presentation in the future. But it's very simple to connect to a VMware infrastructure and allow your end users to start deploying into there. Just to show you on the public side, if we pick Azure, for example, very similar. We have the concept of the Morpheus section, give it a name that means something, and then down here we put in the credentials that we use from Azure, which are very simple to pull together once you have an Azure account. And again, we can then pick our resource group. And something that's quite nice on all of the cloud connections is we can do an inventory. We can actually go away and look at what's already existing out there to give you an idea of what is already in use, particularly useful if you've got customers or your users are already using Azure or Amazon, for example. Finally, in this section, what I just want to have a quick look at is something that was recently added to the product, which is policies. And I particularly like this because once you start allowing users to do their own deployments within infrastructure, you do want to have some sort of control, particularly around things like naming, etc. So we have a concept of policies. Policies can be set at a number of levels, but we can add a policy of many different types. A couple that you'll see in action are expiration, particularly nice one, because what it allows you to do, if you know this is a test and dev lab, then you could set an expiration on here of say 30 days, which would mean at the end of 30 days the instance will be deleted and cleaned up so you're not hogging resources or wasting resources. And you can make that something that's hard and fast, so fixed, or you could make it a recommendation. You don't have to set an expiration, but it's a really useful one if you know that you have an environment that gets messy and if you're then paying money for it. And you'll see that during the process, I do have the ability to extend that. There is a workflow for adding extension. If we just have a quick look, I can set an expiration. I can also set a number of days that you're notified before the image will be deleted. And then you can also add in an approval workflow for setting the extension. Another one that's really useful is naming. So you can set patterns around the naming of the instances so that you have a standardized way, and maybe you want to name all your test machines in a particular way or all your dev machines in a particular way. So you can put in patterns to control that. Again, they can be not selected at all. You can have them user configurable, or you can have them fixed. Like I say, you'll see those two in action during the demo. But also other things can be set. Things like, you might just want to limit at an individual instance level how much memory is deployed in one go, or how much storage you used for one particular instance. So you can control all of that through the policy settings. And finally, one last thing I'd like to show at this point, we do support containers. You'll see that. And of course, it's very important to be able to deploy your Docker hosts, and we support that within our cloud infrastructure. So once you're connected to a cloud, you can then start deploying Docker hosts in there and provision those, and Morpheus will then manage those for you and make provisioning onto them very, very simple. So that's our connection to the clouds. We've got our configuration done, we've got some policies set, and now we're going to make use of them. So we're going to go over into the provisioning section, and here we're going to go into instances. So what I want to do is add an instance, and what I need to do is I'm going to deploy an application. I have been given a deployment. It's a WAR file that runs on top of Tomcat, and it has a database element which runs in MySQL. So for my project today, what I need to do is stand up a MySQL server, a Tomcat server, and deploy a WAR file onto it, and pick a cloud to do that in as well. So let's start. So let's add an instance. And at this point, we get a panel up, and there's quite a wide range of applications available in here to me. Now, this is a Morpheus maintained list. We provide this as part of our solution to you, and we've created and maintained this list. And as you can see, it's a wide range of things like applications, Apache, Ansible, Cassandra, etc. Operating systems like CentOS, Ubuntu, Windows, and also there are some infrastructures in there as well. So for example, the obvious one there is Azure. Now the idea of that, and I'm not going to go into it in this particular presentation, but the idea of that is if you're already using Azure or Amazon, you may already be using images from their marketplace. And so this allows you to say, right, I want to deploy an Azure image. It's a particular marketplace image, and you can go and pull that from the Azure marketplace, and we will deploy that for you, but it will be done under the management of Morpheus. So it's a really nice feature if you are bringing people in who are already started to use those cloud infrastructures and you want to sort of wean them over into using Morpheus deployment. But the more obvious thing to do is pick what you want to deploy and then pick where you want to deploy it. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. So we're going to start with the MySQL instance. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to hit next. So notice at this point I'm not picking a cloud or anything else. I'm just saying I want a MySQL instance. And now I get a box where I need to make some choices. So the first one is group. Now I have a wide selection of groups in here because of my administration level, but I'm going to pick that group demo. Do you remember we had a look at that? And within there was a range of clouds. Now I'm going to deploy into the Morpheus cloud. The Morpheus cloud is actually a set of Docker hosts running on bare metal back in our dev lab, and that's what I'm going to deploy. Now remember, because I'm in group demo, we had a policy set and there was a naming policy, and it was a user selectable, so I could change this if I wanted, but it's going to use my initials. It's going to use a cloud code, which is set when you connect to a cloud, and the type of instance I'm deploying. So we'll know whose it is, what it is, and where it is. I can set an environment tag, so I can say, yep, this is a test machine. And I hit next. Now, I make some choices about the image. So first of all, I'm going to pick a version. Now, we maintain a library of multiple versions of images across the multiple clouds, and with MySQL we're now up to 5.7. As new versions come out of these images, we will add those into our library. But of course you can add your own images to the library as well. we have a template management section, and you can add your own templates in there of operating systems, application stacks that you use on a regular basis. And you can also turn off our own the Morpheus library if you want, so you don't have to offer all of those images to your users. So you can be very selective about what they see. So I'm going to go with 5.6. I know that's the build I like. And because I'm deploying onto a cloud where there are only Docker hosts, I get the choice of what type of Docker image do I want to deploy. If I'd done this on a VMware infrastructure, I would have had the choice of deploying it as a VM. Likewise, if I deployed it into Amazon, I would have been able to deploy it as an image or a Docker host if there were Docker hosts running in Amazon. The other thing you can see here is MySQL is a clusterable app, and the template is aware of that, and I can deploy a single instance, or I could choose to deploy a multiple stage instance. And if I pick the master one, for example, we would spin up 2 instances, 2 Docker containers on 2 separate Docker hosts, and then link those programmatically to make them into a master cluster. And that's all done for you automatically. But I'm going to go with a single master. And now what I get to do is pick a plan. Now, plans are a Morpheus construct that we've built upon the public cloud type ideas. So we want people to start thinking about, you know, what sort of configuration, and then if there's a cost involved. So you can put these plans together. We have a plan engine where you can build out your plans. Again, you can put as many or as few in there as you'd like, and you can make them as locked down or as flexible as you like as well. So for example, currently the 128 megabyte 1 gig storage, I actually could go in and change those values now. You can see that the panel currently has those open because the person who set that plan up has left that open. However, if I select a plan, for example, 1 gig, 10 gig, now it gets locked down. I can't change anything. So this image will be 1 gigabyte and 10 gigabytes. Now, we also have pricing here. If we are connected to public clouds, we will bring in pricing, but you also have the ability to put a price book in of your own as well. And you can create your own price lists, price books, and then use those. So during deployment, people can see how much this image is going to cost them to run for a period of time. And also you can then report on that as well. Finally, what I just need to do on this panel is I'm going to connect to this image in a moment. So I want to have some credentials that I can use. So I will put those in and I will hit next. And now we come through to our automation panel. Now what this allows us to do is do some things with the instance once it's provisioned and whilst it's up and running. So the first thing here you'll see is a workflow. So we have a workflow engine that allows us to take tasks and then create a workflow out of those tasks. Our task engine can connect to things like Chef, Puppet, Ansible, Salt, and many other programmatical languages and configuration utilities. So we can actually build up a whole suite of things that can be done during deployment and put into a workflow. So for example, you might want to deploy an antivirus agent into your images once they're deployed. You might want to add a monitoring tool that has to be installed once an image is running because that's the way it registers with the central system. You might want to lay down all the latest service packs rather than keep updating the templates with service packs. You could do it at creation time and runtime. So there's a wide range of things you can do with the workflow engine, and they can be done now at deployment time, or they can be done later on. You can also invoke workflows at any point during the life cycle of an instance. Here is where we can decide whether we want to have a backup. From this point of view, it's the Morpheus backup. It's very simple. I either want a backup or I don't. There is a set schedule that will be run. You can configure that at the back end, but all the user who's deploying the instance says is, do I want a backup or not? Again, they can create, if you give them the rights, you can give them the ability to create ad hoc backups as well. I say really what it's about is a point-in-time snapshot, really useful, particularly for test and dev, where you might want to make some changes, check it out, and maybe have a backup before you do that, just in case. And finally, life cycle. So here you can see the other policy that was set on my image, which is expiry. Our lab manager likes to run a tidy ship. So when I deploy into this particular group using these clouds, he makes sure that the image will delete after 24 hours. He's worked with too many people to know that us demo guys like to leave stuff lying around. We forget to tidy up. So he now has a way of doing that automatically. Now if I did deploy this and I wanted to keep this image for longer, there is absolutely the ability to request that. And actually you'll see that once we've got the image running. The difference with shutdown is that shutdown will just power the image down. So if perhaps you didn't want to take the risk of doing a deletion, maybe a power down would be enough. That's going to save you money in the public cloud space because you're not then paying for CPU cycles. So maybe you want to shut it down instead of doing an expiry. And as you can see, because shutdown hasn't been set up, I can set a value myself if I want to. Hit next. We get a summary of the instance that I'm going to deploy. We can be told about it. And perhaps I want to have multiple copies of it. Maybe I want to do a stress test, or maybe it's an image that I just want lots of copies of. I could actually deploy multiple copies at this time. So we could type that in and hit go. But I'm just going to hit complete now. And that instance will now be deployed. So if we come down, we can see JS SM Docker, so my initials, the cloud code that was set, and the MySQL instance that's been deployed. If we select that, what we should see is the image, and in fact it's already up and running. As some of you may know, have already used Docker. Once you have images built and templates deployed, it can be very fast. It's a great way for deploying application stacks, and Morpheus is optimized for use with Docker, and so the image is already up and running. In fact, we can look here. Here's the history. It provisioned. It took roughly 3 seconds to deploy. And what we'll start to get through in here is performance data directly from the image. So we'll start to understand how much memory, CPU storage, etc. it's using. We'll start getting the log files from the application. So there we get our MySQL log files. We'll start looking at the environment variables, very important for these type of application stacks and programmatical integration, where we want to use these so we can see our environment variables. And we can even attach to a console. We have built-in console in Morpheus because we're in a Docker host or container connected on a Docker host. We go into the root of the container. If we were deploying a VM, we would need to log into that to use it. So that's that image deployed. Really simple, very few choices I had to make. It's really easy to get that up and running. Now what I need to do, if you remember, my application stack was made up of 2 instances, is I now need to spin up a second instance, and this one is Tomcat. So I'm going to select Tomcat, hit next, put it in the same group, same cloud, same naming convention, happy with that, put it in test as well, hit next. Again, happy that it's a Docker instance. I'm going to give it the same sort of memory and disk, and then we're going to hit next. Now this time in our automation section, as well as the workflow, backup and lifecycle, we also have the ability to select a load balancer. This is a web scale app. The template knows that this is a web app and it scales out, and when they scale out they typically sit behind a load balancer, so you have a single point of entry. So we have integration into load balancers. So we can select that, and then we can pick the load balancer that we want to use. Now in our demo lab, we have our Morpheus load balancer. We provide a load balancer as part of the solution that you can use, but we also have integrations into a lot of the major load balancers out there, so Netscaler, Avi, F5, A10, etc. So you can integrate into those and use those, and we will update their records when you do your deployments. For public cloud, we also support the Azure and AWS load balancers as well. So I'm going to tell it I want to use the Morpheus load balancer, hit next, hit complete, and we will now spin up the Tomcat server as well. You can see it provisioning there as well. Now while it's doing that, what we need to do is we need to actually do some work on the database. Now I'm going to do this manually. I'm going to connect to the database and actually put some data in it. I need to create a table, some tables, and put some data in there for the application to connect to when we deploy it. But if this was a regular occurrence, I could actually do this through scripting. Perhaps you could use Ansible to update the records and import data, etc. So there's lots of things you can do to streamline this process. But equally, I might be building an app for a first time, so I need to connect in and use it. So I'm just connecting to the database here. It's a container, so on the 10,000 port, hit connect, and we're connected in. And now what I'm going to do is create a database in there, and I'm going to call it Spud, and we'll create that. And then I'm going to add in some data, and that's just a very simple script here that I'm going to use. Obviously, it's not really part of the demo, this piece. It's just showing me connecting to the database and using it. And you can see the performance data is starting to come through, log files, etc. Are coming through, as you saw earlier. So we've got our database, and that's connected, it's running, and it's got some data in it. And we then have a Tomcat server which is sitting there, and in fact it should be available now if we select it, and if we hit the IP address, there we go, we've got our Apache Tomcat server up and running on a public IP address. So that's there and available to me as well. But remember, I need to build an application stack. We need to deploy a WAR file on here, and I need to do that. To do that, I need to connect the instances together and make them aware of each other. So we do that using another part of Morpheus. I'm going to do that using our app builder here. Now, there are several ways to use this, and one of the ways is to use a template builder. And I'll very quickly show you that. What this allows you to do if you have regular stacks that you use, application stacks in your development house or in your application deployments, you can build these up and configure these as much as you want to. You could leave them very blank so that you're just saying, right, this is a general framework, or you can build them up and include things like the clouds that they're going to run on, the size of each of the instances, etc. And as you can see, they can be very simple or they can be very complex stacks. We're still going to go with a hybrid one because we're going to build an application using the same template engine, but we've already got the apps built, the individual components built, because we're going to pull in the two that we've done. So first thing I need to do is give it a name. So we're going to call it AA Demo. So I remember to delete it. We have the demo group. Remember, we're using that group, and hit next. Now, I could put in a template if there was one that I knew was for this application, but rather what I do is show you how we can do this. I'm going to select our app. I'm going to select our database, and then I'm going to add an instance. And again, as you can see here, I could now start building the instances, pulling in all the details that you saw me do a few moments ago, or we can go and pull in the existing one, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to find the Tomcat image, and I'm going to find the database image that we've already created and have running. And then within here, within this graphical component, what I do is I'm just going to build up the hierarchy between the two. So we have the app and the database. Of course, this could be scale out, and you could have multiple tiers in here as well. That's done. Hit next, hit complete, and now we have our application. So here we have AA Demo. It's our application stack. It's made up of a database server and a Tomcat server. They're both running. We can see the performance data from both of them. We can see the stats, etc. If we look at the environment now, we're seeing the environment variable for the application stack. So we can see, are they connected? Are they linked? Are they knowing about each other? So they've been cross-populated. And when we look at the log file now, we have a look at the Tomcat server and the MySQL. So we're now looking at the application stack log file. So if you're having a problem with the application stack, this would be a great place to come and start troubleshooting. Likewise, we have built-in monitoring, so we've built a monitoring stack for this application as well. So we've put in a MySQL check to make sure the database is there, that it's responding in time, what is its latency. Likewise, what is the Tomcat server? Is it available? Is it responding in time? And if any one of those elements goes down, we can get an alert, trigger an alert, which could be an email or an integration into ServiceNow or any other number of other help desk application units that you might want to run your tasks in. But we have the application monitoring here, and that was all built just out of that application template. Now the final thing to do is actually do our deployment. So we're going to go into the Tomcat server, and again the template knows that it's a deployment platform, so we have a deployment tag. Before I do that, what I just need to do is I just need to tell the Tomcat server that I have a database. It's the one thing it can't pick up, again, just because I haven't written a script to do it. I could do database name, and I'm going to put Spud. Remember, we created the database. I'm going to add that and save all. So I've now added that environment variable, and I need to restart the instance for it to pick that up, but I'm also going to restart the instance once I've done my deploy. So we'll do that in a moment. So here we have our new deploy, and we hit new deploy, and we have a range of templates that we can deploy from. Again, we have a deployment template builder, which allows you to pull in your you pull your application together. So we have Spud Marketing. That's the application I've been tasked with delivering today. I have my versions. There is a new version, 2.1, but I know that that's pre-prod. I want to use 1.3, and I'm going to hit next. Now we get into our deployment, so we're going to put in some ops, Catalina options here in a moment, but also you can see that this deployment could come from a file. Now by file, that turns the Morpheus server into your deployment server. We've uploaded during the deployment template build, we've updated or uploaded our WAR file onto the Morpheus server with simple drag and drop. But as you can also see, we could do a URL fetch, or we could go to Git, and that could be a public or a private Git repository. So we're really sort of covering all of the options that people who want to do deployments and application building and DevOps really want to cover. So we've done our deployment, hit next, hit complete, and now that will deploy that WAR file up onto that Tomcat server, and will then make that application available to me. So what I'm going to do now is just to pick up my environment variables is I want to restart the service. And here you can see that in the instance I have access to a number of functions that I might want to do. So the one I want to do now is restart the service. So I don't have to log into the box, I don't have to connect to it in any way. It's all available to me here within Morpheus to go and restart that instance within the Docker container. You can also do a number of other things. One that I like is reconfigure. So remember, we're doing this in test. Well, we might decide that our Tomcat server with 1 gig of RAM isn't really big enough for this, so we could now go and resize that box and give it more RAM, more disk, so that it's more of a production level box, and that would Morpheus would then go and reconfigure the instance and restart it and allow it to use the bigger resources. But the other thing, if you remember, that we had was a load balancer, and that means we can add Tomcat nodes. So we can actually make this a scale out app. Now if I was in the SQL instance now, I'd actually have the ability to add a SQL agent, or sorry, a SQL slave node to the cluster. So we allow you to scale out those applications. But here I want to actually do it by web scale, which is add another node and sit it behind the load balancer. So simply select add node. And this is another area where our grouping comes in, because what grouping allows you to do of your clouds is say, well, if they're linked network-wise, I have all the network stack set up correctly, why can't I deploy across multiple clouds? So what I can do here is, because of the way our environment is set up, I could actually deploy my Tomcat server onto AWS. So I've got one Tomcat server running on my Morpheus cloud, and I can now deploy a second one into AWS. I can hit execute, and that will now deploy a second instance, and you'll see that start to spin up down here in a moment. So you see that's running. But because of our networking and because we deployed it through Morpheus in this way, it will be connected back to the same database server running in my production environment. Now, that's great that we can do that sort of individually, but what you can also do with Morpheus is have that as a automated process. So we can actually scale out on thresholds. So you can have a scale up and scale down based on CPU, disk, or memory usage of the instances. You could say, well, I always want to have a minimum of 3 instances running, etc. You can maximize it and say, I want to, no more than 10. And here you can see where you can tell it which cloud to deploy onto or decide based on various other parameters. And you can also do it on schedule as well. So if you know you have a regular heavy workload for this application, you could spin up additional instances and then power them back down again at the end of the workload period. But let's just check. I just want to see if the application has actually stood up, and there you go. So our application has been stood up on our Tomcat server and is connected back to our database and is available to me as an application. Finally, to finish off, what I'd like to just show you very quickly is we also have the ability to report across usage. So we can have a look at reports which show us how the various infrastructures are being used, what resources are being used, and this is where things like our accounts stroke tenants come into play. So you can do this at a top level. You can look at individual tenants. So if you're managing a large enterprise with multiple departments and project teams, etc., you can keep tabs of what each individual group is doing. You can also look at analytics, which is where we can help you understand, how much you're spending on a regular basis on the various infrastructures, various clouds, where is it more cost effective to deploy into, and what you can sort of use when you want to deploy. And we have a number of options for extracting this data, using it in billing engines, etc. You can also use this as a sort of a way of deciding who does what. You can limit project teams or tenants and users and roles to amount of resource they can use in different clouds as well. So you gain back control of what you're doing within your infrastructure. And with that, I'm going to end this presentation. It's a very simple overview of one of the many features of Morpheus, but hopefully it gives you an idea of, the concept of self-service, how easy that is now to provide into your infrastructure across any infrastructure that you want to use, and have a standardized way of doing it across any cloud, and also doing that but keeping control, which is a very important thing, and bringing it back into a centralized resource. So thank you very much for your time. If you want more information, please go to our website, and on there you'll find lots of information about the product. You'll also find a range of Morpheus minutes which go into a number of the features in more depth in a very easy to digest snapshot. And of course, you can always contact Morpheus, and we'd be more than happy to give you a deeper presentation and also allow you to take our software for a trial. We love our customers trying the product. So thank you very much for your time today, and hopefully that's been of use to you. Thank you.